current events. I'm Hailey, a junior here at WCWT Centerville, and welcome to the Gemstone episode. Now it's time to strap on your merit masks, check your flashlight batteries, in 3, 2, In the early 14th century, Aladdin Khalji invaded the kingdoms of southern India and looted, among other things, a 186-carat diamond. It was a crowning jewel in his fortune and was passed from sultan to sultan, dynasty to dynasty, for over 200 years. It came to the hands of Babur, founder of the Mughal Empire, around 1526 as a tribute for conquering Delhi and Agra, and it's secreted away in the treasury. 5 emperors, and the Mughal treasury is so filled with jewels that Shah Jahan, the latest in line, commanded the peacock throne to be built at the cost of millions of rupees, with the incredible diamond as a centerpiece perched on the head of a peacock. 103 years later, the Mughals are overthrown, and the throne with the diamond. The raider, Nader Shah, exclaims Koh-i-Noor as he sees the jewel, Mountain of Light. The nickname sticks, and the Koh-i-Noor is traded and traded again within the warring empires of the East, in exchange for mercy and alliances. Ranjit Singh holds it for longer than his predecessors, and when he asks experts to estimate its value, they tell him that if one were to throw a stone north, east, south, west, and straight up, and fill the void in between with pure gold, it still would not exceed the value of the Koh-i-Noor. Singh has it attached to the front of his turban, and later wears it as an armlet. To protect his treasure, when it was to be transported, it was done so in a convoy of 40 camels with identical satchels, with only one person aware of which satchel the jewel was in. Singh suffered a series of 3 strokes around 20 years after acquiring the Koh-i-Noor, and was too weak to speak in his final days of life. He gestured to indicate that he wanted the jewel to be given to a Hindu temple, but the treasurer insists that it's state property rather than personal, and must be given to his successor. After his death, it is hidden in the vault. Mere months later, the new emperor is overthrown and the imperial family dies before a year is out. Now the Koh-i-Noor is again thrust into the world of international negotiations as a bargaining chip. Its owner in September of 1843 is assassinated in a coup, but the assassins are killed the next day in a counter-coup. The leader of the counter-coup, which is the son of the prime minister who was killed in the first coup, took his father's place and installs the deceased emperor's 5-year-old son, Duleep Singh, as the new emperor. Then 6 years later, the kingdom was formally annexed by the British East India Company, everyone's favorite, and the now 11-year-old emperor surrenders the incredibly large diamond to Queen Victoria, later moving fully to England to live out his life in exile. While the diamond was being transported, it was tucked in the waistcoat pocket of one Mr. John Lawrence, who promptly sent his waistcoat to be laundered. The jewel was returned to said John Lawrence under an hour later by the most honest valet of all time, or perhaps the one who didn't think he could get away with selling it, and it was sealed in an iron safe to be shipped to England without further incident. Except the voyage to England. It was, of course, incredibly bumpy and ridden with cholera. Somehow, though, they made it back, and the Koh-i-Noor was formally presented to Queen Victoria on the 250th anniversary of the British East India Company. The stone was exhibited to the public largely to disappointment. While it was very large, the diamond was flawed and asymmetrical. Prince Albert, Victoria's husband, later sent the diamond to be polished and cleaned. It was drastically reduced in size in order to remove several large flaws, but became distinctly more beautiful. It was mounted in a brooch, and Queen Victoria wore it often, although in a letter to her daughter claimed that she was opposed to the takeover of India and further colonization, and disliked wearing the jewel. After her death, it remained property of the British Crown and is now on display in the Tower of London. The governments of India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan have variously pleaded, asked, and demanded, in different combinations, for the return of the jewel as reparations and a symbol of decolonization. Have to tell you, the British Museum, you all know the memes about the British Museum, right? So, the Prime Minister said about the British Museum, in regards to India's request for the jewel, that if you say yes to one, you suddenly find the British Museum would be empty. I am afraid to say that it is going to have to stay put. They're not having that back. Welcome to jewel ownership. It is a complicated mess of international relations. My guys, this jewel had dozens of recorded owners and disappeared from history like 3 times. The original owner isn't even on record. Maybe the original was named Lucy. In any case, they're certainly dead now.
Picture yourself in a boat on a river with tangerine trees and marmalade skies. Somebody calls you, you answer quite slowly. A girl with kaleidoscope eyes. Cellophane flowers of yellow and green towering over your head. Look for the girl with the sun in her eyes and she's gone. Lucy in the sky with diamonds. Lucy in the sky with diamonds. Lucy in the sky with diamonds. Follow her down to a bridge by a fountain where rocking horse people eat marshmallow pies. Everyone smiles as you drift past the flowers that grow so incredibly high. Newspaper taxis appear on the shore, waiting to take you away. Climb in the back with your head in the clouds and you're gone. Lucy in the sky with diamonds. Lucy in the sky with diamonds. Lucy in the sky with diamonds. Picture yourself on a train in a station with plasticine pauses with looking glass ties. Suddenly someone is there at the turnstile, the girl with kaleidoscope eyes. Lucy in the sky with diamonds. 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 Lucy in the sky with diamonds.
In the middle of the 14th century, the Prince of Granada had a beautifully large and clear ruby in his possession, and Castile, which is now a region in the north of Spain, was doing its level best to take over the world in the Christian reconquest of Iberia. The Prince of Granada wished to surrender to Peter of Castile. For context, he was referred to as both Don Pedro the Cruel and Don Pedro the Just. The Granadian prince was welcomed with open arms, and then stabbed to death by the very Don Pedro, who I shall refer to as the morally grey, who he was surrendering to. He found and claimed the ruby and held on to it until his illegitimate brother led a revolt. Don Pedro the morally grey made an alliance with the Black Prince, son of Edward III of England, because he lacked the power to put down the revolt, and the Black Prince demanded the ruby for his aid. It disappeared back to England and wasn't seen for the next 50-odd years, until Henry V wore it on his battle helmet during his campaign in France, when he was struck in the head with a battle axe and nearly lost both the helmet and his head, but miraculously survived as his forces overtook the French. Later on, Richard III wore the gemstone in his helmet in the final battle. His final battle. In Oliver Cromwell's revolution, which disassembled the monarchy, the crown jewels were broken apart and sold, and the ruby disappeared again. But it came back when the monarchy was restored. At Queen Victoria's coronation, the ruby was set in the new imperial state crown and is still on display in the Tower of London in said imperial state crown. So that was a short story, but still kind of a weird one, because it's mostly British imperialism. Mostly. No. That's more, our feudalism. which is less violent and aggressive and significantly shorter history. So we're going to do another quick one. This time in the Americas. In 1876, Samuel Wood hired a group of workers to dig a well, and they found a very strange rock. They saved it and passed it on to Wood, who gave it to his wife. And then they continued on with their digging. A few years later, Mrs. Clarissa Wood went to a jeweler in Milwaukee by the name of Boynton to get a pin mended. While she was there, she showed him the stone. She was told it was a topaz. He offered to buy it off of her for $1, and she declined. That is, until she needed money 2 months later. Boynton takes the stone to Chicago to be appraised, where he found that it was a diamond and worth $700 instead of just $1. When Clarissa Wood learned of the appraisal, she tried to buy it back, and then sued to get it back, both times unsuccessfully. While the lawsuit was ongoing, Boynton leased the area that the diamond was found and mined the hillside for more. He was also unsuccessful and ended up spreading inferior stones in the area to attract investors. Because fraud. Anyhow, he later sold the diamond to Tiffany's for $850, quite the return on his singular, where it stayed until World War I. Wall Street millionaire J.P. Morgan bought it around wartime and gifted it to the American Museum of Natural History in NYC, where it was displayed for decades in the J.P. Morgan Memorial Hall. But on October 29th, 1964, a man referred to as Murph the Surf cased the museum and found that its security left something to be desired. The burglar alarm system was inoperable, and the exterior windows were left open overnight for ventilation. Upon getting his 2 accomplices inside, Murph discovered that his luck hadn't ended there. The batteries were dead, and the display case alarms. Together, the 3 men stole what is practically worth $400,000 USD, but is a priceless amount of historically significant jewels, including this eagle diamond that Miss Clarissa Wood believes herself to have been swindled out of. It's never been recovered. Okay, that one's a little bit less fraught with international relations, but raises some questions. I am very certain that the Museum of Natural History is better secured now, but let's not test that. I don't want to be involved in any crimes, however tangentially. At least not any that can be traced to a scuba script. Sound cool, divers? Don't involve me if you go rob museums. Now here's a song break in which you are not allowed to plot. And this song's by the Eagles, because it's the Eagle Diamond. I'm not having a good transition day.
He was a hard-headed man.
Please forgive me, French speakers, for the next story. In the 17th century, Jean-Baptiste Tavernier, a French gem merchant, took a voyage to India. He purchased an immense blue diamond and sold it to Louis XIV of France for the equivalent of 325 pounds of gold and a title of nobility. The diamond was called the Tavernier Blue after its first owner, until the court jeweler was commissioned to cut the 115-carat stone. He finished 2 years of labor with a 67-carat blue diamond of the Crown of France. But let's be real, no one called it the Blue Diamond of the Crown of France because that name is a mouthful. So, of course, people called it the French Blue, and Louis XIV wore it around his neck during ceremonies. His great-grandson, Louis XV, had it reset into a significantly more elaborate pendant for the Order of the Golden Fleece, a religious organization, featuring another larger red stone carved to look like a dragon, breathing the French blue as a puff of flame, with around 200 smaller colored diamonds. After Louis XV died, it stopped being worn, even after Marie Antoinette rearranged many of the French crown jewels for her own purposes. After the Reign of Terror in the French Revolution, when the crown jewels were looted and Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette were guillotined, the French blue is presumed to have been smuggled to London. However, the exact stone was never seen again. The diamond was recut after disappearing and lost about a third of its mass and a large amount of its luster. There are two prevailing theories about what became of the French blue. One, that the original thief attempted to sell it and another large jewel, but was put into debtor's prison and lost both jewels to the market, where it was cut. And two, that the theft of the jewels was to bribe a military commander who had the French blue recut to disguise its identity, and it ended up in the hands of the Prince Regent of England, who later had a large chunk of blue diamond believed to be a piece of the French blue. But modern analysis has proven that the sister stone is impossible. The blue diamond definitely reappeared, though. In 1812, 45 carats reappeared just days after the statute of limitations for the original theft expired. If the British royal family ended up with a jewel, it was either stolen by a scorned lover, the soap opera of it all, or sold to cover debts. It was acquired by a banker in London named Thomas Hope and reappeared in society under the name The Hope Diamond in a catalogue of his brother's gem collection. The owner of the collection died the same year the catalogue came out, and his descendants fought in court until the collection was split up. The jewel was passed down, with life interest keeping it from being sold. Until Lord Francis Hope married May Yohe, an American concert singer who loved wearing the Hope Diamond in her concerts. He later had to sell the diamond because he had a tendency to live beyond his means, and then Yohe ran off with a friend to New York. The diamond was sold and resold and kept being taken back to the Frankel jewelry firm as misfortune befell owner after owner. It was referred to as the Hoodoo diamond around 1907, until it was sold to a Turkish diamond collector, then auctioned to settle debts, then bought by a Parisian jewel merchant, then sold to Cartier of the modern Cartier jewelry. Cartier sold it to D.C. socialite Evelyn Walsh McLean in 1910 after teasing her with stories of its famous owners and resetting the diamond more modernly. Scandals broke out in the papers. So many of its past owners had gone bankrupt or died, so it must be cursed. Still, the McLeans bought the jewel, and Evelyn wore it at social events. She had a tendency to misplace it at parties intentionally to make a children's game, despite its Secret Service bodyguard, who had 2 guards of his own. The security worked, though, and McLean maintained ownership of the diamond until she passed and bequeathed it to her grandchildren, who sold it later on to settle even more debts. Jeweler Henry Winston bought the diamond and then was persuaded to donate it to the National Museum of Natural History in D.C. How did he do this, you ask? He wrapped it in paper and mailed it in a box, $2.44 of postage, but insured for $1 million. Because that makes sense. Do we trust the USPS like that? Anyhow, the Museum of Natural History doesn't believe in the curse. They said that the jewel is actually good luck because more stones were donated afterwards. Apart from several adventures to be displayed elsewhere, the Hope Diamond has remained behind 3 inches of bulletproof glass in the museum, a beautiful dark gray blue. Okay, on to the curse. Way back in the late 1800s, papers claimed that the diamond was an eye from a religious idol that was stolen. Sound like any movies you know? Like The Mummy, maybe? And it was blamed for a great deal of not fully confirmed tragedies. The ones we know happened involved Louis XIV and his wife, who were guillotined. 16th and his wife, who were guillotined, obviously. Lord Francis Hope, who went bankrupt, and his wife, who divorced him and died poor. a sultan who was deposed, and Evelyn McLean's husband, who suffered from mental illness. Not the many murders, suicides, and scandals in there that you were finding in the rag sheets. But hey, where's the fun in that? It's the Victorian era. Everyone's into the occult. We'll chat about why I picked diamonds in a minute. But first, here's everyone's favorite diamond, Neil.
Where it began, I can't begin to knowing, but then I know it's growing strong. Wasn't the spring, and spring became the summer. Who'd have believed you'd come along? Touching hands, reaching out, touching me, touching you. Sweet Caroline, good times never seem so good. I've been inclined to believe there never was, but now I look at the night and it don't seem so lonely. We fill it up with only two. And when I hurting runs off my shoulders, how can I hurt when holding you? Warm, touching warm, reaching out, touching me, touching you. Sweet Caroline, good times never seem so good. I've been inclined to believe there never was. Oh, no, no. Sweet Caroline, good times never seem so good. Sweet Caroline, I believe they never could. Sweet Caroline, good times never seem so good.
I have to tell you, I got everyone currently in the studio to just pause what they were doing and sing with me. So, context. Earlier this year, a French tourist visited the Crater of Diamonds National Park in Arkansas. I have some questions about his choice of vacation, especially because what he did was go to the park in the rain, rent a kit, and start digging in the mud. However, he found a lovely gumball-sized brown diamond, which looks like rock candy, and I really, really wanted to eat it. And he named it the Kareen Diamond after his fiancée. I wish him all the best and a minimum of diamond-themed drama, curses, and political intrigue. He has plans to have it cut into two for his fiancée and daughter, because diamonds are a girl's best friend, right? Anyhow, thanks for listening to Scuba here on WCWT Centerville 107.3 FM. Now, let's return to the surface so I can pass you all right on over to Amped Up.